So we were talking about safety in the classroom. Now, me and Emily have come out here to the range to talk a little bit more about the safety rules. Now, as you'll notice, we're standing in front of the shooting bay here at the range, but it's okay because we are at a private range, so there's no danger of anybody coming behind us. Normally, this is not an area you would be allowed to stand at any other range. So we were talking about the 4 universal firearm safety rules in the classroom. And when we talk about the 4 universal firearm safety rules, they're all there for a good reason. But the problem with them is that oftentimes it's hard for people to remember because it requires rote memory. It's not something that is just easy to remember necessarily. In fact, to demonstrate this, as we talked about, if there's any CCW class, law enforcement training, military training, anything to do with firearms, we're required to go over the 4 universal firearm safety rules at the beginning of that class. And a lot of times, what I would see when training police officers is I would ask, what are the 4 universal firearm safety rules? And as a group, it would be difficult for them to come up with all 4 of the rules. Not because they didn't want to be safe, but because it required rote memory. So we've developed the SAFE rules that can help you to remember what each of these rules is using the acronym SAFE. So Emily's going to work with me with this SIRT pistol to demonstrate what the SAFE rules are and how they apply. So to start, we're going to go through the SAFE rules and what they are. So the first one is S. We're going to suppose that all firearms are loaded. The next one is A. We're going to aim in a safe direction at all times. F. Finger off the trigger until you're ready for a bullet to come out. And E. Everything in the path of the bullet has to be ready. So let's talk about how those apply and what those mean. So as you can see, Emily's supposing that this firearm is loaded because she's treating it in a safe manner. She's not twirling it on her finger. She's not looking down the barrel. She's not pointing it at me. So she's treating it as though it's loaded. But now let's talk about A, aiming in a safe direction. Emily, what would be a safe direction to aim?
If you're at an indoor range like we are, you'd always want to keep it down range, pointing it down range.
Absolutely. So when you're at a range, point down range in the direction they guide you, and you know you're aiming in a safe direction. But that's not always the case, because what if you're on the 3rd story of an apartment building? Now, where's a safe direction that you can aim your firearm? Where would you aim it, Emily?
You know, that's actually a really good question, because a lot of times people think, well, let's point it down. Well, if you're up on a 3rd story building, you still have 2 more floors below you with people living under you. So down's not going to be a good option. If you have anyone above you on the 4th floor or even more, up is probably not going to be a good idea either. Well, what if we pointed out the window or even through a wall? Well, that's actually a really good question, because outside indicates cars, pedestrians, maybe even animals, and that's also not a safe direction to point at. So what do you suggest?
So if you're in an apartment building or some other location like that, it's important that you always evaluate your surroundings to figure out where is a safe location to aim this firearm for cleaning, dry firing, etc. So one thing you could do potentially in a situation like that is if you have a fireplace. A fireplace is a great backstop to aim at. But regardless of where you're at and what your surroundings are, it's important that you always evaluate a safe direction. Now next we talked about finger off the trigger. Now you'll notice Emily's done more than just take her finger off the trigger. What are you doing here, Emily?
I'm keeping my finger on the frame of the gun.
Good. So what Emily's doing here is what we refer to as indexing the firearm. You'll notice that her trigger finger, the index finger, is resting on the frame or the skeleton of the handgun. In fact, you'll notice that on a lot of firearms there's a little indentation right here that allows your finger to rest on it so that you know you've got it in a safe location. Now, Emily, do you have to have your finger on the frame? I mean, couldn't you take it off the trigger and keep it on the trigger guard?
You know, that's actually a good question. The problem with that is that if you do keep your finger on the trigger guard, for me, my finger's a little bit short, so I can't really reach it, but the point is that it could easily slip and accidentally trigger the trigger.
That's right, absolutely. So she doesn't want to accidentally activate that trigger with her finger, and it's very easy to do. As she mentions, her finger is just a little bit short, it doesn't even get on that trigger guard, but even if it did, and she turns her hand there a little bit, it would be easy for it to slip onto the trigger, like so. That's one reason why we want to keep our finger indexed. The other is this. Let's say we're at a range where we're shooting with other people. And Emily's shooting next to me. She shoots her shots and then she places her finger onto the trigger guard as opposed to indexing it on the frame. So go ahead and put that on your trigger guard. So she's taking her finger and put it on the trigger guard for me. Now if I'm standing next to her shooting, how easy is it for me to look over and tell if her finger is off the trigger? It's not very easy. I can't really tell. It might be off the trigger, it might be on. I'm not really sure at this point. But if she puts that finger index where it belongs on the frame, now you'll notice I've got a clear path in here to see that she does not have her finger on the trigger. This gives me confidence standing next to her that she's a safe shooter. And this is of course how you want the people around you to feel. So the final one is E, everything in the path of the bullet has to be ready. Now this obviously correlates to be aware of your target, backstop, and beyond that we talked about with the 4 universal firearm safety rules. So what does it mean to have everything in the path of the bullet ready? Well, Emily, what are bullets designed to do? Go into things or through things?
Through things.
Absolutely. Bullets are designed to go through things. So it's important that you know not just what you're shooting at, but what's going to stop your bullet behind it. And when we say and beyond that, the reason we're talking about that is not so much at a range like this where you've got a controlled indoor environment, but a lot of people like to go outside and shoot, maybe in the woods or something like that. You have to be aware of not just what you're shooting at, not just what's behind the target to stop the bullet, but what's beyond that, just in case you miss or your backstop doesn't stop the bullet. In fact, Emily, do you know how far the average handgun round can travel if it's unimpeded by something and effectively do damage?
No, actually, how far?
So the average handgun round can travel effectively at approximately 1 mile and still do damage if it's not impeded by something. So that kind of raises our awareness that we need to know what is going to definitively stop that bullet. In fact, Emily, you asked me a question earlier about bullets and walls. What was that question?
You know, I've actually heard that depending on the caliber, the one I heard is that a bullet can go through 9 walls of drywall. Is that true?
So it depends on the caliber. It depends on the type of bullet. If you're shooting hollow point or if you're shooting ball, full metal jacket ammunition, etc. There's a lot of factors in play there. But Emily is absolutely spot on in what she's heard. Bullets are very capable of traveling through multiple different walls, especially sheetrock type walls in modern construction. So yes, absolutely, bullets can travel through walls, which again should really make us aware that we need to be aware of everything in the path of our bullet and make sure it's ready.